Hi, I'm Dr. Jen, PharmD. There's a TV miniseries on Netflix called The Goop Lab, Goop being a lifestyle and wellness brand founded by actress Gwyneth Paltrow. Today I'll be looking at the first episode, which is about using psychedelic drugs in psychiatry. And this is actually a plausible idea. Psychiatry is full of drugs that involve serotonin receptors, and the drugs we call psychedelics, generally speaking, activate serotonin 2A receptors. Although these drugs have been used recreationally, they have psychological effects that people find to be meaningful. People don't describe these experiences as getting high, but more like going on a journey or tripping. It's not a big jump to wonder if we could use these for mental health. The episode is called The Healing Trip. Get it? Tripping, trip. Designed to entertain and inform, not provide medical advice. Well, that settles it. It can't be bogus health advice if it's not health advice. Video done. Just kidding. Okay, it may not be giving you medical advice, but it is wagging its eyebrows suggestively, already hinting that the trip is healing. But I'm sure they just want you to make up your own mind.
But what we try to do at Goop is to be open-minded and explore ideas that may seem out there or too scary so that people can have access to the information and make up their own minds.
See? I mean, this particular idea is not so out there, and I don't see why it would be scary. But the information they give you is limited. I don't think anyone should be making up their mind just based on this show.
Okay, welcome. It's such an honor to have you both here.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, let me point out something. Look at all this space. This is a large, open area with big windows showing the sunny outdoors, a lot of light. It's a wide shot with lots of space between people. It's a very open feeling. It's very white and clean. White flowers, white floor. The seats are light beiges and pinks. There's glasses of water, although there is some orange juice in there, but whatever. This all creates a heavenly vibe, one of purity. It fades to white instead of black. This is not just some nice scenery. It's part of the message. The theme of heaven makes an implicit promise that you see everywhere in big wellness. That if you just live the right lifestyle, the right diet, the right routine, the right supplements, the right weird trick, psychedelics perhaps, you will be rewarded with good health. Of course, there's a flip side to the promise of health heaven, health hell. If health heaven is the result of doing things right, then if you're in health hell, it must be because you're doing something wrong. It's your fault. It's two sides of the same coin, the underlying message that your health is in your control. Of course, health is quite often not in our control. Don't get me wrong, lifestyle is important. There are lots of things you can do to help your health. Get exercise, brush and floss, eat your vegetables. But that's all boring health advice. You can't sell a show to Netflix with that. Plus, it's just no fun. In any case, a lot of health factors are not modifiable, including genes, age, plain bad luck. Bad things do happen to people who do everything right, and people often get away with doing things wrong.
Can you explain to us what MAPS is?
MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and it's an organization that supports and does and fundraises for psychedelic research.
MAPS is doing much-needed research to explore medical uses of psychedelics. A bit more questionably, they'll refer to them as medicine. Because as you watch, it's important to note that the message in this video is not a medical one, it's a spiritual one. And that's okay, as long as spiritual is not made to sound like medical science.
Psychedelics have been part of the human history for thousands of years in the context of spirituality, healing, and celebration of transitions.
You know, there's depression, anxiety, suicide is all increasing, despite what we thought in the 90s was this renaissance of psychopharmacology. You know, Prozac, Celexa, Zoloft. Psychiatry left psychotherapy behind, and we embraced these drugs that we all know give terrible side effects. And really, as a culture, we're hungry for something else and for something to help us heal.
Right.
Psychotherapy hasn't been left behind. Talk therapy is still a first-line treatment for most mental health disorders, especially in combination with medication. As bad as some of the side effects of those drugs of the 90s can be, they have been literally life-saving for many patients. We do need better treatments, there's no question. But are psychedelics those treatments? When we use something as a medication, we want specifics. What dose? How often? For which patients? With what conditions? In what setting? For how long? For what benefits? With what risks and side effects? Toward what outcomes? Medical science is still in the process of looking for those answers. We might be hungry for something else to help us heal, but the facts don't care about our hunger. Maybe psychedelics will be useful in medicine. Maybe they won't be. We don't have all the facts yet.
We decided to try psilocybin, also known as magic mushrooms, in Jamaica, where their use isn't regulated. And we wanted to sort of explore different experiences. Renee, who just wanted to feel more creative and more like her authentic self. I wanted to have a sort of psycho-spiritual experience. And lastly, two people who wanted to work on processing some personal trauma. So we brought Jenny, one of our photo editors, and Kevin, who's worked with Gwyneth for about 10 years.
So 4 of them are going on a literal trip to Jamaica to take a mental trip. A literal trip, by the way, by itself can help stress.
So unlike the clinical trials, we're doing this in a more ceremonial setting. But our amazing facilitator, Jillian, is affiliated with MAPS, and Richard and Sasha, who work with her, are also very experienced therapists. They're like psychedelic elders.
Well, which is it? Ceremonial or therapeutic? Ceremony is based on rituals, beliefs, and traditions. Therapy is based on clinical evidence and professional standards. They both have their place, but they're categorically different. One should not be made to sound like the other.
I just want to tell you just a little bit of context. So the indigenous people who have used these medicines for years have really traditionally used them curing illnesses, like physical illnesses. And they're rather perplexed by us Westerners that show up and want to connect with the divine. They think we're a little odd. And what is missing is, in their context, is that is our illness, is that we do not have any connection with anything other than ourselves and the material world. So this is the medicine.
Hang on. So there's a claim here. The claim is that our problems, our ailments, our traumas, maybe even our lack of creativity, are caused by a lack of connection to the divine. And these mushrooms are the medicine that will remedy the problem, because, presumably, they connect us to the divine. This is on a backdrop of indigenous people who, we suppose, are connected with the divine, who apparently only need to be concerned with physical illnesses, not mental ones. That implies they're doing pretty well, psychologically speaking. But there's a little bit of a problem with that picture. The suicide rate of indigenous peoples around the globe tends to be significantly higher than that of the general population. It varies depending on the specific area and the specific community, but in some cases, it's up to 20 times higher. Indigenous peoples are marginalized communities. They've come into a lot of conflict with the modern world, and they're not the ones who come out on top. Consider the Mazatec in Mexico. They're the people us Westerners got psychedelic mushrooms from. In the 1940s, the Mexican government kicked tens of thousands of Mazatec out of their homes to make way for the Miguel Alemán Dam and Reservoir. They forced them to move. That's not all that long ago, still in living memory for some. Of course, there are issues going further back. When the Spanish colonized Latin America, they made it their mission to convert the indigenous, to wipe out their existing religions and replace it with Catholicism. Psychedelic rituals survived by going underground and being kept secret, but they were changed. Where these rituals exist today, they have integrated elements of Catholicism. This kind of attempt to get rid of indigenous languages and cultures is a common theme in history. The Mazatec call psychedelic mushrooms Niños Santos, or saint children. Indigenous peoples deal with conflicts over land, conflicts over culture, persecution and discrimination resulting in poverty. Their political power, in other words, their ability to participate in decisions that affect their lives, is limited, sometimes zero. These are concrete, long-term problems. So while Indigenous people may seem to have an enviable connection to the divine, this does not fix the trauma resulting from these concrete problems.
And they're rather perplexed by us Westerners.
I don't know. Perplexed really isn't the word I'd use in this context. Let's talk about context. For Westerners, the story of psychedelic mushrooms began in the 1950s. R. Gordon Wasson, an American, went down to a remote town in Mexico, Huerta de Jimenez, to study the Mazatec mushroom rituals. It was so remote, the people there didn't even speak Spanish. He needed an interpreter. These rituals, as I mentioned, had been kept secret. He met a wise woman, Maria Sabina, and when he showed her a sincere interest in the mushrooms and a not-so-sincere interest in divining how his son was doing, she allowed him and his photographer to participate in 2 rituals. They became, in his words, the first white men in recorded history to eat the divine mushrooms. He went back home and published a photo essay about it in Life magazine. He used a pseudonym for her name and the name of the town to protect her privacy. But it came out. The mushrooms were publicized, and in the 1960s, foreigners started pouring into Huerta de Jimenez. These hippies were in search of the divine. They probably considered it to be a noble cause. They were counterculture. They rejected Western norms. However, that didn't magically make them not part of Western culture, nor did it prevent them from bringing in their own Western assumptions. There were sacred traditions around the mushrooms, waiting until nightfall to take them, refraining from sex before and after the ceremony, following a special diet. The hippies didn't know about this stuff, and there was a significant language barrier. And certainly the mushrooms didn't tell them, so they broke the traditions. They disrespected the saint children. As Maria recounts in her oral autobiography, from the moment the foreigners arrived to search for God, the saint children lost their purity. They lost their force. They spoiled them. The Mazatec had a sacred bond with the saint children, but these outsiders, they treated the mushrooms as a resource to consume, rather than as a relationship to maintain. Eventually the town called in the army to kick the hippies out, but Huerta de Jimenez was changed forever. Today things have stabilized. Psychedelic tourism brings money in. Visitors come in with more cultural knowledge, and guides inform them about what's expected. They are more respectful. Note, the psychedelic experience did not make foreigners more aware and respectful. Knowledge made foreigners more aware and respectful. Still, psychedelics have been appropriated and commodified, and not everyone is happy about it. But there's no going back. This is the legacy of colonialism. This is how our modern world is structured. Us Westerners tend to view the divine as a universal power, a cosmic essence that transcends time and space, an epic force that permeates all of humanity, but that we connect with as individuals, each of us, personally, on our own, independently.
Alone!
I mean, us Westerners are immersed in news and media from a world with 8 billion people in it. It's easy to feel kind of small and distant. Our concept of divinity and our connection to it, or lack thereof, reflects that. When we take psychedelics, we see the divine on this grand scale. But the concept of the divine as universal is not universal. Other cultures have different views. The Mazatec, from what I understand, when they take mushrooms to connect with the divine, they're consulting with a local entity, the spirit of a stream or cave or hill, but like a particular stream or a specific cave or their next door hill. And it's about everyday concerns. How is my son doing? I'm sick. Am I going to get better? I lost something. Where can I find it? It's like going over to a neighbor and asking for help or advice. The view is that human neighbors and spirit neighbors have a relationship with each other, and problems arise when things are going wrong in those relationships. When they take psychedelics, they see the divine neighbors and relationships. It's about the community, not the individual. Psychedelics have a reputation for producing spiritual experiences, but the nature of these experiences is different from person to person, depending on the background they bring into it. And the spiritual philosophy being presented in this show is a Western one. It's an individualistic view. Mental health, even health in general, is seen as a personal problem and as a personal responsibility. Is it really a connection to the divine we're missing, or is it a connection to each other?
There must be something that made you go, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this in a therapeutic setting rather than a party setting. And so we're really curious about what that is for you.
So they talk about what the participants want out of the trip, setting their expectations, and ours as the audience.
I would like to understand myself in the context of a bigger universe beyond how I intellectualize it in my brain. I want to, surrender to the experience, let it happen, try not to mentally override, which is my inclination.
Anything that happens is perfect. You can't do it wrong, so you can simply relax.
Oh, that's so much easier said than that.
It's been long understood that mindset, or set, has a big effect when taking psychedelics. Elise already has an idea of what she expects the psycho-spiritual experience to look like, which includes that bigger universe, which she thinks shouldn't be intellectualized. And she's told to relax. That's good advice. Probably just giving that advice will help her relax.
This is going to be my first experience with mushrooms. I've been feeling a little trapped and confined, and so to find that freedom to spread my wings.
So Renee wants to feel free, I guess.
So I'm here to just let go more and do a lot of healing and get over a lot of trauma that I've experienced when my dad died. So I always associated myself with him. I always felt more close to him. And when he killed himself 5 years ago, it really just, he spent much of his life depressed. And we as a family just didn't have the knowledge of recognizing that. It was just like, that's how he is. I didn't really process it for a while. It was 5 years ago, and I just started going to therapy this year.
Well, I want to acknowledge you. You're doing great. So
Thank you.
And doing things the right way. You're here. You're asking questions. You're expressing yourself. It's really beautiful. I commend you for that.
Thank you.
So Jenny's had some trauma, and she's had some therapy, conventional therapy, which has helped her. She says she has to let go more. They don't seem to have much to add, just encouraging her to express herself. I expect her experience will be influenced by these things.
How are you doing?
It's a little nerve-wracking, for sure, absolutely. I've gone to Peru and done ayahuasca, and you're in this ceremony house with all these strangers, and you're shown something from the medicine. And then you just sort of set off on your own, and it's like, oh, I saw something, and like, what does that mean? And who can I talk to about something that I just saw?
So
and
important.
How do you work through that? And then you just kind of bury it back down.
So Kevin did psychedelics before in a ceremonial setting, but it didn't go well. Did it connect him to the divine? It sounds like he couldn't tell. Maybe because he wasn't connected to the people around him.
What is it you want to shift? What are you up to?
I sort of grew up with an absent dad, and so I think that's it's definitely caused issues. Just getting close to people, letting people in,
Because you can't trust them?
Yeah. It's been a struggle through most of my life.
Have you found other men that you connect with?
I have some friends, yes. I've had a few boyfriends here and there, but, it's just sort of, you get too close and I just sort of shut the door and pull back.
We have questions that we can't answer, which are questions from our childhood, and so the medicine is there as a tool So we can use it as a tool to get some insight.
Kevin describes his problems with relationships, and they say the medicine will give some insight. But it sounds to me like he already has insight. He doesn't say, I don't know why I can't get close to people, maybe childhood. He says, my dad wasn't there for me. I couldn't trust him, and I know I'm pulling back because of it.
Because he had tried so many things in his experience in Peru where he went to do ayahuasca, and essentially he had no idea really what he was
actually very
experiencing.
scary.
Psychedelics amplify painful memories, they amplify painful emotions, they bring them to the surface so that we can deal with them. You know, you've got these people who are now flying down to Peru or taking ayahuasca in a warehouse in Brooklyn without the proper support, thinking, oh, I'm just gonna take this and I'm gonna be much better the next day, but it can actually be incredibly destabilizing and you can actually feel worse in the short term.
Is that why you hear of, people who took LSD and had psychic breaks, like they took it recreationally and...
The bad experience with psychedelics, and there are many of them, all come down to three things. It's inappropriate dosage, inappropriate set, which is the expectation going into the experience, or inappropriate setting. And the setting is the environment that it was taken in. If set, setting, and dosage are carefully managed, we see intense experiences,
Right.
and we see periodically distressing experiences, but that does not mean they are bad experiences.
Here in the US, we've grown up with the war on drugs. We were given dire warnings about hallucinogen abuse that led to bad trips and psychotic breaks, along with scare lore like people jumped out of windows thinking they could fly. I remember in 6th grade making anti-drug poster about LSD. The only trip you'll take is to the grave. A lot of it is nonsense, but there is a risk of a bad or destabilizing experience. It's important to acknowledge that risk, and they do make a point to do that. They happen to also be making sure that the audience knows that an experience can be distressing without being bad. So that if you see distress on screen, it's not necessarily bad. And that's fine. But they say it all comes down to inappropriate dosage, inappropriate set, inappropriate setting, in a way that implies that even though there is a risk of bad experiences, we can control or prevent them, as if there were certainty to it. I have a couple stories about mushrooms. Both were in a recreational setting with friends. Inappropriate. I think a better description would be higher risk. A long time ago, there was someone I knew struggling with depression and anxiety. They took mushrooms just for something fun to do. They did have fun during that trip, but what was remarkable was that afterward, they did not go back to being depressed. It was like a reset button. They were better. Now, after a few weeks, they did go back to being depressed. This was not some sort of forever cure, but it's still pretty impressive, given that most drugs for depression need to be taken daily and take weeks to be effective. I knew this other person a long time ago, struggling with depression and anxiety. They took mushrooms, also just for fun. Their trip went all right. They had some fun. There were no big freakouts or anything, but afterward, their depression was worse than it was before. A couple weeks later, they made a suicide attempt. If we use psychedelics as a medicine, we want to know, how do you get the first outcome and not the other? Like, specifically, in a way we can replicate. The dosage was more or less the same. The setting was inappropriate, but it was just as inappropriate for the first person as the second. Maybe the problem was set, then? When the first person talked about their trip, they talked about how when they were depressed, they didn't get any pleasure out of anything. Nothing was fun. Everything seemed boring and gray. This is called anhedonia, and it's a common symptom of depression. But the mushrooms made them see the beauty of the world. It gave them the joy back. The second person talked about how they had been feeling a lot of guilt, although they had been holding it together. But the mushrooms made them see through all their defense mechanisms. They saw that they really were a bad and worthless person, and they should stop making excuses. Needless to say, their guilt was much worse. But this is looking at it in hindsight. The first person also went into the trip with a lot of guilt, and the second person also went into the trip with a lot of anhedonia. So we come back to setting. It's not that there's a binary, appropriate or inappropriate, as if we can get rid of the risk. It's about lowering the risk. A therapeutic setting lowers the risk because it allows the opportunity to make a therapeutic intervention. But it doesn't make it no risk. Throughout this video, they have some interludes they call case studies, where a person tells their story of how psychedelics help them. One is about using psilocybin for anxiety about cancer, another about MDMA for PTSD, and the third about microdosing. I have a whole other video on MDMA for PTSD. I'm not going to get into the other two topics in this video, but they could be future videos. I want to draw your attention to the wording, case studies, as opposed to, say, testimonials, which is what they really are. I mean, a case study isn't just someone telling their story. There's more detail and background, usually given by people who aren't the person. But case studies sounds more sciencey.
Is this sky crazy? The sky right now is crazy, right? I feel like I did this as a kid, right? Like you just lie on your back and watch the sky. I don't remember the last time I did that.
Something that psychedelics do is make you notice things that you weren't paying attention to. Things you didn't even realize you were ignoring. Clouds going by, patterns on the floor, your own inner thoughts.
The walls are coming down a little bit. And I feel like that's why I get talkative, because I was not I remember being a kid and like everyone would like compliment my parents, like, oh, she's so like quiet and well, like respectful as a child. Like, yeah, because I was like scared to talk.
Psychedelics can make thoughts that you don't normally think about come to the surface. That can bring some insights. But what you should know is your pre-existing beliefs, biases, habits, assumptions, they're all still there. Jenny describes this insight that, as a kid, she was quiet because of fear. But it sounds like this may be coming with the assumption that she should not have been afraid. Maybe she shouldn't have been. Or maybe it was totally reasonable for her to be scared of talking. Maybe the fear was protecting her from getting yelled at or getting in trouble. We don't know. In this setting, of course, she was explicitly encouraged to express herself.
It's like the energy of my dad, and I just like could feel it was like him, and I just feel like he wouldn't be like happy. And I'm doing this and like me resisting because of that, and then this release came of just like, you need to let go of that, and it felt like very physical, and just like that release happened. Now the tears have turned to laughter.
Good. Let it. They're both good.
So now we're seeing a bit of those difficult experiences that, as an audience, we were prepped for. Jenny mentioned earlier that she was here to let go more, and when she had some thoughts that made her tense, she followed through on that. Now, there is a little bit of a shift here. Earlier, they were talking about insights and questions and expressing yourself. Now they're emphasizing physical release. Let's think of this from a TV show producer's point of view. One of the secrets of a good story is that something changes between the beginning and the end. But to actually show whether this experience changed people, they'd have to do some follow-up. Like come back in 6 months and interview them, see how it affected their feelings or behaviors. Who's got time for that? Insights and questions and expressions, those they can show right now. Although, you know what would be even showier? Physical release.
Do you believe that our bodies store the trauma somewhere, or is it entirely locked in the subconscious? Because what we observed in Jamaica through our experience was that it was releasing from people in all different ways.
Yes, I absolutely think that emotions and memory are stored in our body, and we're seeing that in the patients that work with psilocybin and MDMA.
So this trauma is stored in the body thing is a layer of a spiritual philosophy that's been promoted by MAPS. They try to make it sound empirical, like, oh yeah, this is what we observed happening. I mean, they observed an emotional expression. They observed crying, talking, laughing, a relaxation after physical and emotional tension. Releasing trauma is an interpretation, not an observation.
Again, psychology and psychiatry, we're taught, don't put your hands on patients. Oh my God, you're going to get in trouble. But I think if we don't learn to do that better, we're going to actually lose some of the opportunity for healing.
The reason therapists are taught not to put their hands on patients is because it can harm the patient. There are so many ways it can go wrong. To be clear, I'm not talking about like a hug if the patient is upset and requests one. There's no rule against that. There's a power imbalance between therapist and patient, which from the get-go brings in some serious consent issues. If a therapist touches a patient in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable, but tells them this is a therapeutic touch, the patient may go along with it because who are they to question? This can be damaging to a patient. There's something I would like to note about MAPS specifically. During the process of seeking FDA approval for their MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD, there have been patients who have come forward and said that they have indeed been harmed. I talk about this in a lot more depth in another video. Check that video out if you want to know more. That's about all they show of Renee.
Where's Sasha?
Sasha? Right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, your energy is pretty good all the time. I don't know what it is.
Take him on. Yeah.
I was on the way there again to the light source.
Yeah.
It was very beautiful, very profound to lie there next to Kevin and watch him be held by these two men who were embracing him in a way that he hadn't been embraced as a child by his own father. And besides what was happening, you don't even see those sorts of expressions from adult men to adult men.
They praised the hug as being a beautiful moment. And it was. Kevin could trust these people, and the show's producers, to make him feel supported. The hug is very physical and dramatic. But is it life-changing? I have some doubts. People who pull back when they start to get close usually do that to protect themselves from getting hurt. But when you're connected to people, getting hurt is always a risk. You can reduce the risk by being choosy about who you trust, but it's not just a matter of you can trust people. They'll always be there to support you. You need to accept some risk. But who knows? They only show a small part of his trip, and it's not like they'll have a follow-up in 6 months to find out.
We need to find ways of connecting people.
Yeah, no,
These
absolutely.
medicines are medicines of connection.
You look at the team at Goop, everyone here in some level is a deeply successful person, right? And yet they are all carrying a tremendous amount of pain and loss. And I think so many of us are taught, like, you're thriving, you're good, like, how dare you? You, for example, what could possibly be wrong with you? You have everything. You're beautiful, you're wealthy, you're famous. Like, shut up, But I think that is a perfect example of how our lack of understanding.
Yes. This is where this systemic cultural lack of connection comes in. Like, if everybody felt connected, they would understand that I as well have had incredibly painful and traumatic experiences. And I had a lot of trauma in my childhood, and being the person that people perceive me to be is inherently traumatic.
They talk about a lack of understanding and say it's systemic, but they're talking about an individualistic solution. If only everybody felt connected, the world would be a better place. It kind of implies that it would be great if everybody took psychedelics.
I have a private practice where I see wealthy clients, poor clients, famous people, and just average Joe. But within 2 or 3 sessions, everyone is talking about relationships and disconnection. I mean, I've been in mental health, I think, 7 years, and I've been on this earth 39 years, and I don't think I've ever met a healthy person yet.
The healthy people aren't the ones who go to mental health professionals. Again, the implication is that this medicine is for everyone. Everyone. We just need each individual, personally, on their own, independently.
Alone.
To feel connected. Well, that's kind of a non-starter. Besides, it's not feasible or appropriate for everyone to take psychedelics. Let's not wait for everyone individually to take mind-expanding drugs and then hope they spontaneously understand a particular perspective in a moment of insight during a trip. New perspectives can be taught and learned, and should be. There's always going to be times when we don't know about or think about someone else's perspective, as with the hippies and the Mazatec. I mean, I didn't know anything about indigenous perspectives until I was writing this video. I went looking, and it changed my perspective. And it changed what I ended up writing. No Saint Children needed. Now, you might be tempted to start thinking about cases where you try to teach people a new perspective, but they're not receptive to the message. Is the solution to wait for everyone individually to take mind-expanding drugs, then hope they spontaneously accept a particular perspective? Given that the trip is driven by prior expectations and beliefs, not likely. Also, keep in mind that perspective does not automatically change behavior. I'll give you an example. Many kids in the US reach a moment in their lives where they refuse to eat their vegetables and are then educated on the fact that there are children starving in Africa who would love to have those vegetables. In reaction to this new perspective, the first instinct of many kids is to change their behavior. That is, pack those veggies up and mail them to Africa. However, there are several systemic barriers preventing that change. Kids don't have easy access to postage or packing materials, or the knowledge on how to pack vegetables, or the money to pay for the shipping, or the understanding that Africa is not a shipping address. And even in cases when they do have access, there are often physical difficulties as well. If we want our kids to be able to get those vegetables into the hands of starving children, we need to work on those barriers. More seriously, it's not exactly fair to go around saying a systemic lack of connection is a problem, and then turn around and lay it on the shoulders of individuals. Focusing on the individual doesn't solve systemic problems. It draws attention away from them. Medicine can help with personal barriers, but medicine can't build and support communities. We have to do that, together.
So I would like to talk about integration so that you keep what you got. When you feel yourself sliding, because you will. You will, because of the chaos that it isn't always like this. We're in the Garden of Eden right now, and then we go back into all that other stuff.
Right.
The place you want to stay in and want to be in isn't linked to Jamaica or Los Angeles or anywhere. It's in you. So you can actually create that for yourself in the middle of a war zone.
She says something important here. The place, the experience, comes from within. It may sound a little cliche, but it is true. At the same time, it's presented in this view that modern life is chaotic, that it's bad, it's painful, it's a war zone. The heaven, the Garden of Eden, that's inside, and you create it for yourself, by yourself, alone. I can get behind a spiritual philosophy of connection, but they kind of seem to be missing the point.
This is not a typical workplace experience, although I kind of wonder if it wouldn't be incredibly therapeutic for workplace teams if you felt really safe and wanted to become even more intimate and connected with the people that you spend a majority of your day with.
So it was a bonding experience with others, together. Anyway, the episode is wrapping up now. with each of the 4 participants making some comments. Sorry, each of the 3 making comments. They don't show Renee.
In all honesty, I've never felt the way I did last night ever in my life.
Still feel like I'm processing a lot. Like I'm really drained physically and emotionally. And I feel like I went through about 5 years of therapy in about 5 hours.
This reaction makes sense. A psychedelic trip involves noticing so many different things, having so many different thoughts and insights, and can feel like a lifetime happened. But keep in mind, this wasn't made as a factual statement. Don't mistake it for one. Like, if you go on a 5-day trip through Europe and you visit 10 different countries, you've crammed in so much, seen so much, it feels like you've spent 5 years in Europe. But it's not actually like living in Europe for 5 years. I mean, duh. But I kind of feel like they included this statement to imply that the mushroom trip was literally like years of therapy.
We've just scratched the surface of where we're going to go with psychedelic psychotherapy.
Right.
Hopefully what will happen is therapists, healers, psychologists, and psychiatrists will observe the benefits across our country.
I mean, they talk about this as if broad benefits are already proven. And don't think I didn't notice that juxtaposition of the spiritual-sounding healers with therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists. The medical, as I mentioned before, needs to answer a whole lot of specific questions with research and clinical trials. That's the standard. Healers don't have such requirements. Now, there are clinical trials in progress, and not just for MAPS either, because there has been a lot of interest in the past few years in the potential benefits. Just last month, the company Compass Pathways reported some preliminary results from a phase 3 trial with synthetic psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression, and they were positive. A single dose with psychological support led to better results than placebo after 6 weeks. And naturally, their stock plummeted. Even though the effect was positive, the size of the effect was underwhelming to investors, apparently. It's no miracle cure, and it would be competing with Spravato, a ketamine-based nasal spray for treatment-resistant depression. Note that we're talking about one specific group of patients, those with treatment-resistant depression, not the general population, not everyone. But it does seem likely enough that psychedelics will have a place in medicine, and for more patient populations, as we find out more. Not because of hoping people will spontaneously see the benefits, but because we are looking for them. The episode tells a story, as it should. That's what entertainment is supposed to do. But stories often inform you in ways you weren't paying attention to, things you didn't even realize you were ignoring. It's worth being mindful of the messages being told. This is a story of emotional and spiritual ailment, a story of trauma, a story of feeling disconnected, and a pathway to heaven. If we all just follow indigenous wisdom, our idea of it anyway, with the appropriate dose, set, and setting, psychedelics can connect us with the divine, and we will be rewarded with good health. The story has a happy ending.
Since going through it, what's been your experience of being in your body?
I've definitely felt more of an openness and hopefully letting people in. And thank you for letting me do all of this fun stuff. And
shut up.
No, thank you.
I love you so much.
I love you. I've definitely felt more of an openness and hopefully letting people in.
Hopefully. Because nobody can know yet if it actually helped. The episode only shows you what's needed to tell the story. I mean, what happened to Renee anyway? Was she just cut for time? Or...
It was fun, but it's not all that.
Cut! We'll never know. But what are your thoughts? Did this video give you any new perspectives? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.